Hey everybody, my name is Paul Esden Jr., aka Boy Green. I'm the New York Jets digital reporter for Heavy.com. Welcome to our show. We do this every single week, every Thursday normally, right around this time, and we dive into, well, the world of football. And of course, we do that with my main man who has beautifully coiffed hair. That is Randy Mueller, our NFL front office insider, and of course, former NFL general manager at multiple locations, and of course, the former executive of the year as well. And you see what he's representing, because not only do we talk NFL football, there's another three-letter league that we will be discussing, and that is the XFL. So without further ado, let's welcome in my partner here, Randy Mueller, into the show. And Randy, week one is in the books for the XFL. I mean, give us the little taste here, Randy, to start us off here. All right, I think we are waiting for Randy to get that through his head, so that's okay. We'll get that through in a second. He's not able to hear anything, so we'll get Randy on in just a second. I'll look through some of the comment sections. We're walking everybody in. That's okay. Some technical difficulties here on the program. Let's go to some of these comments. Let's go. Finger Lakes Jet fan jumps in here. All this Rodgers talk and posturing is becoming sickening. I will say that this is a very long and drawn out process with everything that's been happening. I feel like it's even longer for Jet fans. I know we got a lot of Jet fans on my YouTube channel. We're streaming in a couple of different places, so we'll go with the Jets love in here, obviously, as well. Because the Jets have realized since the end of the regular season, quite frankly, that there was a chance that a new quarterback was going to come in, that someone else was going to enter the fray. So it feels, I think, a little more drawn out from a Jets fan perspective, because the last couple regular season weeks, we kind of saw what was possible. Then obviously we've kind of had this full offseason as well to kind of dive through a lot of this with speculation being connected to every possible quarterback on the planet, left or right, up or down, or what have you, from that perspective. So it has been crazy. Some are sickened by it. I'm still not, because you know what? The Jets are an incredibly attractive place. Sam Monson said it yesterday on the official Jets podcast. I tweeted out a clip late last night that I'm just excited because the Jets are in a prime position. They're an attractive suitor. You know, when you're at the 8th grade school dance and you're in the middle of the floor and everyone wants to dance with you, that's what the Jets are. And that is an unfamiliar position for this team in particular. So it feels great because I just have a sense of confidence that they are going to land somebody. Is it Derek Carr? Is it Aaron Rodgers? Is it someone a little lesser on the scale like Jimmy Garoppolo or Ryan Tannehill? Regardless, I think they're landing a guy that will be a dramatic upgrade for this team, and that will promise so much more, because I think a lot of Jet fans realize that if the Jets would have had just a little bit of spice at the quarterback position this past season, that then 11-year playoff drought wouldn't have become a 12-year playoff drought. They would be in the postseason for certain. So I think a lot of people expected that to happen, but that's a great question, obviously, to get us started here. All right, let's go. Take two, baby. We just talked a little bit of NFL, but like I said, there's another three-letter league that we need to get into, and that is the XFL. And my main man, Randy Mueller, with the beautiful hair, will be joining us here to describe not only the NFL, but the XFL, which just completed week one. Randy, exciting times in the XFL. What was the first taste like in this next iteration of the XFL?
It's sure exciting, Paul, and I hope you can hear me, because we've had some technical issues here, as the listeners can probably tell you. Maybe give me a thumbs up if I'm on par with you here now and you can hear me. So,
yes, absolutely.
Yeah, the XFL we opened last week with 4 really good games across the country. We as in the Seattle team played in DC. We lost the tough game Sunday night. We happen to be in Seattle today for our home opener tonight against the St. Louis Battlehawks at Lumen Field. So that'll be seen on FX tonight. The good thing is all of our games in the league are all national TV games. They're either on ABC, one of the ESPN families, or on FX. So it's kind of fun. We have a quick turnaround, and I'll be honest with you, Paul, I wouldn't recommend playing on Sunday night in Washington, D.C. and turn around having to play Thursday night in Seattle with a 2-day stop in Dallas in between. But we're going to make the best of it, that's for sure.
And that's great. And yes, in case you don't know, again, we talk about the resume for Randy every time we come in. Again, a former NFL general manager at multiple spots, a former executive of the year, but currently he serves as the director of player personnel for the Seattle Sea Dragons. So we all know who on this show we're rooting for in the XFL. Again, I need to dive in. I need to go to the Seattle Sea Dragons website. I need to get some merch. I'm a merch guy. I need to dive in so we can all properly represent the gosh darn Sea Dragons here on the show, because there are some exciting players on this team, which leads me to a next step in this, Randy, as we're talking about XFL. Are there any players, either you can do some shameless self promotion on your guys' wonderful roster that you were able to put together, or the XFL in general? Are there names in this league that could be making the jump either to the NFL for the very first time? Sometimes that happens with some of these players, or really getting themselves back into the league. Because I don't know, I see a couple of players that Ben DiNucci, Josh Gordon, perhaps. I mean, there's some sex appeal here, Randy. You did a great job with this roster construct.
Well, I think you could say that for the whole league. And yes, to answer your question, I think there will be a lot of guys who get opportunities. Our league ends the end of April, which is an ideal time for them to jump into the NFL. And obviously, that's what we want from our league. We want our guys to get opportunities in the NFL. You mentioned two of them. Ben DiNucci started games in the NFL. Josh Gordon has been a former Pro Bowl, all-pro receiver in the NFL. But you mentioned another angle that most people don't realize is there are a lot of young kids that did not get opportunities in the NFL and in training camps this year, mainly because this COVID, sixth year, super seniors, this a year ago was a giant draft class. It was giant. And the NFL couldn't absorb all these kids. So I think it is a great time to build a team from scratch. That's what the 8 XFL teams have done. They built teams from scratch. And I know just from the Seattle point of view, we've got 10 or 12 guys that have never been in an NFL camp, that if I were a GM of an NFL team right now, I would have no problem signing them and bringing them to camp to let them compete for a job. That's how good the talent level has been. So it's been fun to construct it. We've played one game. We have 9 more to go, so we got a long ways to go. But it's fun action. It's good quality, made by NFL guys for the most part, and coaches and in GMs and other people around the league. So it's been well done. The Rock, Danny Garcia, Jerry Cardinale have given us all the resources to build our teams the way we want, and that part of it has been fun. So I'm anxious to see how this league ends up. I think it proved last week that the numbers on TV lend us again to once again agreeing that spring football is what people want to see and that they're not afraid to watch it. And it's been kind of fun.
Yeah, that's actually a good point. We'll take a quick detour on that XFL point you just made, because of the for example, undrafted free agents in a normal, perfect NFL year is incredibly difficult to go from undrafted free agent after April to make an NFL roster and to make it through. Sprinkle in COVID and everything else that's been happening the last couple of years, a lot of these guys fell through the cracks. And then guess what? The next year, there's a whole new crop of undrafted free agents and guys that they're worrying about. So a lot of players here slipped through the crack, talented players, but I love that the XFL is providing a wonderful platform here for these guys to get not only the multiple opportunities, as we talked about with DiNucci and Gordon, but some of these guys are getting their first whack at the pinata, which is a really cool twist here for this iteration of the XFL, Randy.
Yeah, and I'll just speak mainly on us, Paul. We have a starting left tackle who is an offensive lineman at USC, a kid named Liam Jimmons, who played guard at USC, didn't get an opportunity in the NFL for whatever reason, but has grown to 326 pounds. He's really been a good player for us. I think he's tailor-made to be signed by an NFL team when our season's over. We've got 2 little, quick, really fast receivers, and I mean fast for NFL standards as well. Jacour Pearson out of Ole Miss and Jalen Redd out of Oregon, 2 guys that work in our system because we run the run and shoot offense, and June Jones is in charge of our offense. These 2 guys can run in any league, and least of all, I think we'll give these guys a look. And that's just one side of the ball for one team. My guess is there's going to be 4 or 5 of these guys on every team that people never have heard of because they've never got a chance beyond college, and they will all be in NFL camps next year.
And Randy, let me ask you this: what is the hope from the XFL side of things? Because you're on the Seattle Sea Dragons. Do you want, after your season is complete, will you have a sense of pride as players from your team are vultured by the NFL and you see them get those opportunities? Will that be a prideful moment for you? Or are you really, quite frankly, hoping they're just producing and, hey, I want to stay here with the Seattle Sea Dragons? Because not everyone is destined for the NFL. Sometimes this league may be the highest they ever go, so they could just continue to pump and grind in the XFL. What's your perspective on that?
Yeah, and that's the same theory and same speech that we've given these guys, Paul. It's a great point in that we're going to have a couple different sets of players, some of which do attain to get to NFL standard again, and some have never got a chance. But you're right, some have bounced back from the NFL, and this is going to be it for them. They're going to play a couple years at the XFL level and then move on to real life. So we've been honest and upfront with them. We're going to do everything we can to push our guys to the NFL. We'll talk to NFL scouts. I know for a fact NFL scouts and pro scouting directors because they've called me. They have interest in our players. They're going to get undrafted free agents once the draft is over, but then they're going to fill in with guys from the XFL that have done a good job. So the opportunities are there. Again, they come. We have guys ranging. We had one kid just turned 21 last month, and we've got another offensive lineman that's 33. So the range is all over the place, age, experience level, and it's been tricky, but we've tried to fit a whole team together in the last 6 weeks of training camp, and it's been a fun process. It's been grueling, but we think we've got a pretty good group right now, and I think they're all having fun. I think they really want to win. That's what they care about. They're not here for the money, I can tell you that, Paul. What they're here for is to be on film so that they can change the way the NFL perceives them, and only film does that. It doesn't matter what they get paid, really. They want to get on tape because that's the golden ticket, right? And to get on film for 10 weeks, it's really a tryout for 32 teams. There are a lot of guys that came with us off practice squads at the end of the NFL season and didn't sign futures deals in the NFL because they want to come get on film and get in front of all 32 teams. So it's a really good concept, and that is the end game for us, is to get as many guys back to that NFL level as we can because it only helps the quality of play in our league.
That makes a lot of sense. And one more, Randy, on the XFL before we move into some other juicy topics we have here on the slate. And what's the overall perspective on the XFL? Again, this is the third iteration. Depending on your age of our listeners and viewers, you may remember the one way back in the day in the early 2000s. There was also a second iteration of Vince McMahon that ultimately ended up selling to The Rock and also Danny Garcia, and this new iteration that we've seen. What makes you feel confident that this time around they'll be able to solve it? Because I do believe there is a thirst that needs to be quenched. People love football. There is no offseason in the NFL with the draft and free agency, but the capitalization of a spring league has not been able to be manifested. And I don't believe not due to lack of demand, but lack of supply in the right way. Why is the XFL the answer this time around?
Well, I think it was the answer last time around, only this thing called the global pandemic hit. And that was in 2020. Otherwise, we would probably be in year 3 of the XFL. So that's really what happened the time before. I think this is set up to succeed. There's plenty of financial backing. Jerry Cardinal, Redbird Capital. We all know what The Rock and Danny Garcia can do from a marketing and branding standpoint. That is running wild right now. And so we've really done a good job of spreading the word. But I think this iteration of it has a long list of reasons why I think they'll be around in several years. Most of them come to light almost all daily. We have some partnerships with the NFL. We're working on some little different rules in the special teams. Kickoffs are a little different. If people tune into the games, they'll see probably less collisions on special teams. So we're building player safety. All things that the NFL wants to see and has told us they want to see, and we'll build the body of work for them. We've got partnerships on some coaching fronts and some minority internship fronts with others in the NFL. So I think at the end of the day, the NFL needs a league like this, not only to develop players, but develop other people, front office, all kinds of things. And we had this for years with NFL Europe. We would send players to NFL Europe. We would send equipment guys. We would send trainers. We would send coaches. All of them got great experience to come back and then really be able to contribute at the NFL level. And I think that's the end game for everybody, is to have a little partnership like that where we can work hand in hand to help the NFL gain a more traction in some other areas, not only players, but in all these ancillary departments as well.
Another great point that I don't think people realize when they see these leagues coming out, USFL that will be coming out in a little while, the XFL right now, and more, that again, the development of some of those other parts of the game, I think are great reasons, quite frankly, to continue to show your support. So let's, transition now from the XFL to the NFL. And well, we've got more to talk about with quarterbacks. And there you go, the old green and white for all our Jets faithful who are watching. And Derek Carr had a multi-day visit over the weekend that started on Friday night and worked its way all the way through the weekend. We'll start with Derek Carr and get to the merging of some sunshine happening in a little bit. But we'll start there with Derek Carr. This is his first free agent visit. The other visit was when he was still a member of the Las Vegas Raiders, and he did that as an agreed-upon visit to the New Orleans Saints. So this was his first free agent visit, and Randy, by all accounts, it seemed like it was a raving success for both sides, according to reports.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think it's an information gathering process, and sometimes the free agent trail can get done quickly, and sometimes it takes several weeks to gather the right information. I think Derek's going to kind of take his time with this, to be honest with you, and just see where all the spots come in. I wasn't surprised that the Jets were involved with him. I am a little surprised that they went all in, but I'm glad they did, because they can't assume that they're going to even be in an Aaron Rodgers sweepstakes or another quarterback sweepstakes. They've got to go all in on Derek Carr. Now, saying he's going to be a Hall of Fame quarterback is optimistic, but I get it. And they're trying to recruit him. They're trying to make him feel as comfortable as he can. So they've got to go all in as if this is the only option. So I like that bit of philosophy that the Jets have thrown his way. So it'll be interesting. I think he's going to make a couple more stops. I think the Jets' biggest competition is all going to come from the NFC South, whether it's Carolina, Atlanta, New Orleans. Those teams are all in their quarterback market as well. So we said it here on the show, Paul, several weeks ago. Derek Carr is going to get a raise. He's going to get a long-term deal out of somewhere, and someone will be happy because he's going to upgrade. I think he'd probably upgrade to 2/3 of the league, to be honest with you. I'm not putting him in a top 8 or 10 category, but he's going to upgrade a lot of teams in this league and has proved that he can be very functional and win a lot of games with the right people around him.
Well, Randy, take us behind the scenes. What the heck happens on a visit like this? Is there some level of a workout? Is it more so like a college recruiting and showing them the town, rolling out the red carpet, taking them out for some food and all those kind of things, and then just really trying to sell them on why that individual should want to play here, the market, and everything else? Really, what happens? Take us behind the scenes. I'm sure you've had several of these kind of visits during all your different tenures as an NFL general manager.
Yes, and free agency has evolved as well to its at different levels nowadays. Fans and listeners should take it as a dating process, really. And the first date is an exchange of a lot of information. They're getting to know each other. They're trying to get as comfortable as they can. I'm sure the Jets will do a full medical workup on him. You've got to have all that information. It would be like a combine visit, but there won't be a workout, Paul. We've got, in Derek Carr's case, 8 years of film, right? We don't need to go see him throw a football in shorts. We've got plenty of film to do that. The medical stuff, he'll meet with coaches individually. They'll exchange philosophies. They'll kind of get to know him, what he likes, what he thinks his strengths are. I think it's an honest assessment by both sides to share their side and see where it goes. It's funny, depending on the team, these visits can be extreme. And I remember back in early days of free agency, and this is late 90s when I was in Seattle. Obviously, I'm a Seattle guy. We had Kenny G make a video for us, and he played a saxophone piece for us to entice free agents. And so we had he spoke on Seattle, he spoke on the area, he spoke on growing up there, and we used that as a selling point to free agents when they came in. So you can take it as deep into this as you want, and it sounds like the Jets got pretty detailed, but I wouldn't discount any of these things because I know that players want to be wanted. And as much as a front office, as a coaching staff, and as a city can make them comfortable, will go a long ways toward helping them. Now, obviously, it comes down to the almighty dollar, and that in the end usually determines it. But everybody gets to put their best foot forward, and that's really what these visits are all about.
So let me ask that, Randy. I know we may not know the specifics of this particular visit, but in general, you spoke about contract, and it does come to that almighty dollar. Is that something before the visit is even, put into actuality? That is something that Derek Carr's representation and the Jets would even discuss potentially before the visit even happens. Is that a scheduled part of the visit? That okay, this has all been great. What are we talking numbers here, or is that a second or third date? Am I going a little too far? Am I skipping a few bases in the old baseball analogy, perhaps, in all of this? How does that work?
I think the numbers would probably come toward the end of the whole process, Paul, and just put myself in those shoes. I would want to make sure that Derek Carr's comfortable. I want to make sure that he gets the answers about our program and our structure that he wants. The money part, and I would couch it like this: if I had him across from my desk, you're going to get paid, Derek. Don't worry about the money right now. We'll be competitive, if not beyond competitive, with that. So let's just set the money aside. You're going to make your money. We'll structure it however we think is best with your representation. You're going to get paid. So let's put that at the end. Let's just gather all the information. Let's date for a time or two, and then I think the money end of the whole process. Because let's face it, he's going to want to have a couple teams maybe bidding against each other to get what he wants as well. But that's accepted by most clubs. They're going to know they're not in it on their own, and they're not going to be able to get a bargain on Derek Carr. I think that would be foolhardy to think like that.
And by the way, speaking of contracts, this is just something Jet fans say all the time. So I need to, truth, a fact or fiction here with Randy Mueller to figure this out. Sometimes we hear fans say, well, you can't let that guy out of the building. When you get him in, you got to lock the doors. In this particular case, like if things are going as well as you say, all right, Carr, you and your representation, you're here. We're here. Let's figure this thing out right now, and let's go to the negotiating table. Is that a real thing? Does that ever really happen, or is that kind of just a made-up fantasy from fans in these types of conversations?
It has happened to me one time. I think it's said often by fans and even by media likes that you shouldn't let him out of the building. The only way it's going to happen, though, Paul, is if you put down a whole bunch of money. And that's going to remove all doubt. And there has to be another set of circumstances relating to if the player, like he's walking away from a table and it's not going to be there again a week from now, then he's got to really think about it. In particular, this happened to me in Seattle when we signed a free agent linebacker from the Steelers, Chad Brown, who was a multi Pro Bowl guy who I knew was going to us first, and we strategized his visit to come to us first, and then he was going to Carolina next. But we also had another linebacker coming in the next day, and I was going to offer the same deal to him. So we kind of structured a couple visits to where he had risk if he walked out the door. And you know what did it at the end of the day? So to answer your question, it does happen. Mickey Loomis was our cap guy at the time, the current GM of the Saints, and he and I worked together on this deal. When we got to this point where we knew we had to put up or shut up and we didn't want him to leave, we slid a real check signed by Paul Allen for $7 million across the table. And we said, you can walk right now, but the check stays here. And he ended up, we ordered sushi, him and his wife stayed, and he signed that night. So it was so much money back in those days, and it would take that same amount of money now times 10 to get someone to not walk out the door. It's got to be, you've got to outbid everybody and outperform the expectations financially that have been out there for you and really detailed by you and your agent. So it happens. It's happened one time to me in 30 years of doing it, but it's a possibility. It's just not really realistic all the time.
That's so cool. That's an amazing story, Randy. I love these. These are some of the great stories that we're able to have together. And well, let's go to the other piece of this, because maybe one of the reasons the Jets didn't go to those lengths, of course, is the Aaron Rodgers factor in it. Every single report, no matter who the reporter was, Jeff Darlington, Diana Rossini, Field Yates, and so many other great reporters, they said, wow, at one side of their mouth, this Derek Carr visit went great. However, they want to see what happens with the Aaron Rodgers darkness thing before they make a decision. Now, early on in the process, it seemed like maybe they wouldn't get the luxury of knowing what was going to happen there before their decision with Carr, which maybe, to your point, could have made it more complicated. It sounds like now from David Carr, both Derek Carr's camp, that they will be waiting this out. This will be a quote unquote long process, is how his brother described what's going to happen for Derek Carr, which I'm sure the Jets are like, great, now we should know everything before we make our decision. It has been announced earlier today. Aaron Rodgers has emerged from the darkness. Later in the show, I will read you the details on where Aaron Rodgers was kept, and we'll just get some more thoughts on you from that. But before we get there, overall on this decision-making process, Randy, can you take us behind the scenes of this strategy? It's a dangerous game of cutting red wire versus blue wire and making these decisions because Derek Carr is just a free agent. All it costs is Woody Johnson's money. For Aaron Rodgers, it costs Woody Johnson's money and probably a slew of draft picks to try to acquiesce and make that deal happen. And obviously, you have the pros and cons of each player. Take us in the strategy of this and how the Jets are going to try to pull this off, because it seems like a dangerous game of Russian roulette.
Well, I don't know how dangerous it is, but I do like the fact that it seems like they've been all in on Derek Carr. Now, no one's saying Derek Carr is Aaron Rodgers, but their attitude has to be, we are going full steam ahead. We have blinders on the rest of these quarterbacks. I'm telling Derek Carr, I really don't care about Aaron Rodgers. Here's what we're going to do. You're going to be the quarterback of the Jets. Here's how it's going to work. Here's the scheme we're going to run. Here's the people that I want to bring with you. I'm going to add another receiver. I'm going to add another defensive, back. Whatever I'm going to do, I'm going to roll the plan out for Derek Carr. And he believes, and we believe that he's going to be the guy. We can always about face and change later on if the Aaron Rodgers sweepstakes includes the Jets. There's no idea what Aaron Rodgers is going to do. So I surely would not pass on another quarterback based on thinking we can connect the dots with Aaron Rodgers, because we know how those dots are going to go. It's going to go this way, this way, this way. All those Aaron Rodgers dots will be all over, and you won't have any feel for it at all. And you're right, the compensative package is going to be complicated as well. So I don't know how that's going to work out. He hasn't even said how long he wants to play, Aaron Rodgers. So I don't think in their right mind would give the Packers what they want unless they knew for a fact how long Aaron's going to play. We don't even have that information. So if I'm one of these teams, I am all in on Derek Carr. He's probably the best on the market right now. And I'm going to take my chances that the Aaron Rodgers thing plays out in some fashion later on. But if I can get Derek Carr signed right now, I'm going to do it.
Fair enough. And before we move on, yes, we have the details here. Here is the darkness retreat in which Aaron Rodgers is at. This is from ESPN. Here is how it was described. The time that Aaron Rodgers spent at the darkness retreat was in a partially underground hobbit-like structure with 300 square feet of space devoid of light, with a queen-size bed, a bathroom, a meditation-like mat on the floor that is fully powered. Randy, your thoughts on the containment unit of one Aaron Rodgers here, which again is really fascinating when you go through all these key pertinent details. I think a lot of people simply are just fascinated by the overall process here, which is really interesting because, again, Aaron Rodgers is a unique individual, something that, again, you have to accept. Just kind of going into the process as a whole is exactly those factors within itself. That, again, Aaron Rodgers, if you want this talented quarterback who brings a lot to the table, a future first ballot Hall of Famer, a guy that is a four-time NFL MVP, one of the best quarterbacks, quite frankly, of this generation, sometimes you're going to have to risk it to get the biscuit. Sometimes you're going to have to be willing to do whatever it takes to land a player of that magnitude. And to do that will take a certain level of conviction. If you are Aaron Rodgers, it will take that certain level of conviction. So again, with that being said, for those of you who missed it, again, Aaron Rodgers was kept in a, quote, partially underground hobbit-like structure. This is a direct quote, by the way, with 300 square feet of space, devoid of light, with a queen-size bed, a bathroom, a meditation-like mat, and it is fully powered. Let me throw that over to you, Randy. What are your thoughts with that description of where Aaron Rodgers apparently was held captive for the last 3 to 4 days?
Far be it from me to judge, Paul. I'm not going to go down that road. Each to his own. He can do this. Hey, my daughter called me for years when I would go on these scouting trips. I would say, I'm in a dark room all day long watching tape for 12 hours. So I'm in the same boat as him, and I've done it for 30 years. So I may be a hobbit myself, and I've been called worse. So I understand it. Each to his own. It's probably not for me to have to make a decision in that fashion. But if it works for Aaron, God bless him, and maybe he comes out a much smarter man and a much more knowing man. What do they say? There has to be something that I don't know, the knowing of which changes everything. So I'm going to go and let him handle his business the way he wants, and then we'll see where they're at the end of the day. I know this: the Packers want an answer. The Packers want to get moving on really building their team out this spring, and they've got to work in conjunction with Aaron Rodgers because of the structure of the contract both agreed to a year ago.
Yeah, no question about it. Again, he is a unique individual, but to each their own, and some good quotes from that. All right, let's move on to this, because this is where everybody is going. Right around the corner, of course, next week is officially the Underwear Olympics, one of my favorite off-season events, which is the NFL Combine, which will be starting next week, which will be absolutely delightful. But that is really, and Randy, you can speak to this, and really where we want to get into it, that seems to be the place where the framework of free agency is truly set up. I know, technically speaking, the legal tampering period is coming up in a couple of weeks, but, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. I feel like a lot of that is done in Indianapolis at the NFL Combine. So tell us, Randy, what are front offices doing to prepare for free agency around the league right now, and especially as we're heading into this NFL Combine process where everyone is all together normally in a centralized location?
There's a little bit of a misnomer with regard to what does happen in these settings, and especially in Indy, because just because all the teams are there, there's not a lot of communication between teams. I'll be honest with you. But I know my life as a GM was spent, all of my time in Indianapolis was meeting with different agents, some of our own players' agents, some of free agent agents. We might take 10 or 12 meetings in a day, Paul, and sit down and just get an idea of what this player's expectations are. Where do you see the money going? What's going to be the strategy and the timing of you making a decision? Is this going to be a Derek Carr long deal, or am I going to go somewhere and make up my mind? Because my client doesn't want to go on this recruiting trip of 4 or 5 teams. The first place that comes that he likes, he's going to sign with. So you take these meetings, you get a little strategy and gather some information on how players are going to conduct their own free agent tour if they're going to have one. But that's really what you spend a lot of time doing. You spend a lot of time on free agency. You spend a lot of time interviewing the college players. In the evenings, you spend 4 hours a night interviewing all the college guys that are there to work out. People would probably be surprised to know that the least important thing for us, Paul, as GMs, was the workouts on the field. We really don't care about that. And I'm not being disrespectful, but a guy can throw it through the roof of the dome in Indianapolis, and it's not going to affect his draft status to me. I get a kick out of watching, and I know we're building TV shows and making content, but I get a kick out of those guys on TV saying, "Oh, that throw was unbelievable." How they're not playing football, Paul. There's nobody trying to take his head off. Trust me. He ought to make every throw because there is no rush, and he can stand there and wait till the receiver gets open. So there's just a lot of factors involved in those on the field workouts that most fans want to see, and I get it. But the other stuff is much more important. The gathering of medical information, the interviews of the kids, and the meetings you have with agents on free agency helps you strategize a little bit your next 2 or 3 weeks. When you come away from Indy, 1, you're exhausted, but 2, you've got a really firm lay of the land for both free agency and how to attack the rest of your spring evaluations for the college draft kids.
Well, I will say that I am very shallow, I guess is the best way to put it, because I am wooed when they're throwing it in t-shirts and shorts. I'm like, wow, ooey mama, we gotta move the draft board. They gotta shoot up. Guys, he's shooting down. It's just crazy. All of it is crazy. That again, like for us. Right, which is crazy to think about that, right? Like us surface level people are like, oh man, shoot up. I remember one of the great examples from a few years ago was DK Metcalf, who came in and looked like this, Greek god that was chiseled from anything. And again, ultimately ends up in Seattle in the funny moment of, DK having his shirt off to Pete Carroll taking his shirt off in the back room, which was great. But like DK Metcalf was kind of like, oh, he looks great, but what is he really? Then the combine happens and all of a sudden everyone's like, man, top 5 pick, clearly, no question about it. And he ultimately ends up going in the second round. So, it is us crazy fans, I guess, in the middle of all this combine stuff there, Randy, which is fun.
It's a good event. It's expanded from what used to be 3 days to now almost a full week. It's really become a combination coaches convention, vendors convention. There's everybody selling everything all the way in and out of the dome to your workouts. There's all these companies and businesses that are hawking their wares, and I get it. It's a great time because everybody is there. but truly the football aspect of it is internalized with every team kind of lining up what they want to do and how they want to attack the next 2 or 3 weeks. There's not a ton of trade talk. And I know that's a kind of a misnomer that's out there, that teams will start to set the table with trade talks. They've either already done that or they're going to do that down the road. I think the reason that this gets a lot of run is because there's a lot of media there, right? And so the media speculates that all these teams are talking to each other. It's not the GM meetings in baseball. It's really not. It's so much other stuff that you have to gather, that trade talk and positioning for the draft, that'll all happen way after this window of Indianapolis.
Let me ask you a couple of nuggets about that. First off, let's talk about that, because that's one of the talks of the town. Is the Chicago Bears have the #1 overall pick, and they have put the for sale sign very clearly in the door of their used vehicle out on the front lawn. And they've gotten a few calls, I would imagine. But where does that framework start? We've heard people speculate, oh, Senior Bowl, of course, that's got to be where it's at. The Combine, that's where you lay the framework of a deal. Pro days, like, where is this happening, Randy? Give us the truth here, the truth serum, because I feel like there are, as you've put it throughout this conversation, some misnomers with what fans believe is happening and what is really happening at some of these events.
Well, Ryan Poles has done a good job. He, like you said, has put the for sale sign out, which is what you need to do. You need to get the word out that you're willing to listen. I don't think teams, and I'm just going to speak for my teams in the past, we didn't have our top 10 settled yet. So I couldn't tell you what made sense to go up to. Yeah, you might look at all options in case the picks fall like you like them or like you want them. But most teams don't have that much information yet. Their coaches have just got involved now in free agency. They haven't got involved in the draft process yet. We haven't done our top 30 visits yet. We haven't spent time with these kids to know that, hey, this guy is worthy of us going up to get. They just don't know that yet. And I see all these mock drafts that are already out there. I get it. Fans want to see that. But the cart is way ahead of the horse when it comes to really the factual part of how NFL buildings operate. And so there'll be plenty of time for that. I don't think you can speculate too much other than, like we said, Ryan Poles has said we're willing to drop. But I guarantee if you gave Ryan Poles some truth serum, he didn't want to drop below 4 or 5, because the risk is you drop out of the players. So there may only be 5 or 6 blue chip players in this draft. And I'm just throwing that out there. Maybe there's 2 or 3. I've been around some that the draft goes 10 or 12 deep, but they don't know yet. And Ryan doesn't know how far he wants to fall yet. And then who's really worthy of coming up to get? That's what everybody thinks is, oh, somebody's going to come up to get Bryce Young. Someone's going to get up to get a quarterback. We don't know that because the NFL hasn't put their stamp on these outside the building evaluators yet.
Yeah, and I'm sure from the Bears' perspective, the dream scenario, to your point, is double dipping within the nature. Again, they sit at #1, and there's apparently, according to all the media people, all these teams that want to move up. If the Bears could do Mitchell Trubisky style and flip from 1 to 2, and then they allow the Houston Texans to get their top pick, then maybe 2 to 4, let the Colts jump up for their guy, and then in theory, the Bears could get their Jalen Carter. They could get their Will Anderson, their blue chip defensive guy, and a treasure chest of picks. Now, reality and fantasy don't always intersect appropriately for that sort of thing to happen, but that is one of the sexy topics, certainly of conversation here during draft season, Randy. And one more additionally that I want to get to here on the free agency side of things. This is something you've talked about before, but I'm just so fascinated by it, Randy, that quite frankly, this show could be just a 24-hour camera feed where I'm just following you around your entire life, asking you all kinds of pressing questions. And one of them is the free agency big board of how you as a NFL team are stacking all of your free agents on a board and ranking them and power ranking them in terms of priority, in terms of contracts, in terms of everything else. Can you just give us a small slice of what that is actually like for an NFL team? Again, as we're approaching here, because free agency, the legal tampering period, we're only a handful of weeks away before we're knee deep in all of that.
Most NFL teams have done that part of the process. They have stacked their free agent board. And I think the critical point is when you consider how each team does it, you're really looking for options and upgrades. Those are the 2 things you've got to dial down on. And then you may only have a select few. It might be the GM, might be the head coach, might be your scouting director. They might be involved in placing our potential free agents in that slotting order, because that's the critical factor. We have 3 guys that are going to be free agents. Let's put those cards in where we think they belong in the full list of free agent let's just say tackles that are available. So there may be only one or two better than the guy we got. So one, you better pay him fast. And two, you can't overpay these other guys because there's only one available. So you can't fill every hole. But what you can do is you can use that information and then the degree of difficulty based on that particular roster spot is also considered what's in the draft. Well, we don't have to overpay to get this one tackle that's better than ours because we think it's a deep draft for tackles and we might be able to have a better chance to draft one in the second round. So the strategy carries over into a whole bunch of multitasking exercises, and GM's brains are kind of scrambled, but they figure all this stuff out. And my guys used to say, if you fall and hit your head, Randy, we're dead. Can you put some of it on paper? And so we would actually have this draft board and put it on paper so that one of us weren't concussed, and the whole plan goes out the window.
Yes, that's a key in all of that process, which I'm sure is easier said than done. But putting that together is a key piece of the puzzle. Let's go how we end every show here. We're emptying the GM notebook, and if you guys are new to the show, first off, make sure you show your support, like the video, hit subscribe down below, and also get involved in the comment section. But of course, we end every show talking about the random quick-hitting nuggets we didn't cover already that may have caught in Randy's eye this past week, including the franchise tag window opening up, and that's a bigger deal for some teams over others. What were some of your observations this week with that opening up, Randy?
Well, the couple names that come to mind, and there's been a lot of talk about what the Giants are going to do with Daniel Jones and what the Ravens are going to do with Lamar Jackson. I think the plan is probably a little more clear in that the Giants want to keep Daniel Jones. It's a matter of finding common ground along with the Barkley contract that they can fit under their cap. I think there's a little more gray area when it comes to Lamar Jackson, and that's the one, right? Because the coordinator is involved, the new scheme is involved. For whatever reason, Lamar has decided to make this fully guaranteed demand the hill on which he makes his stand. I really don't think that stuff's going to change, Paul. And we've talked about it on the show here. I don't think the Ravens are going to acquiesce and all of a sudden guarantee a whole bunch of money. That's just not going to happen. So what I foresee happening is in this window at some point, may have some more discussions. And I think the Ravens would be willing to go above and beyond where they were last fall just to get a deal done because they don't have any other options right now. But at the end of the day, if the Ravens have to put a franchise tag on him, and I think it would be the exclusive one because they can't get cute, right? What's $5 or $6 million trying to save that on Lamar Jackson when we can assure we have him and we really don't have another plan. So I could see them using the exclusive tag on him. He'll fight it. He'll walk away for all the offseason. At some point, if he wants to get paid, he's going to come back because he's got to get the checks, right? And 1/18 of $45 million is a lot of money. So eventually, and every player says, I'm not going to play for the tag. I'm not going to play for the tag. Eventually, they're going to play for the tag because that is a lot of money. So this conjecture of all the chaos and it really is a distraction for your team doesn't exist outside these buildings. Inside the building, there is no distraction. They're going to coach the guys that are there. They're going to work toward getting that group together for our team build. And then Lamar Jackson either can elect whether it's next September 1st or whatever to come or not. My guess is he will come. If he wants to stay out, God bless him. But this is just a hill that I don't know is worth him making a stand on because I don't see the Ravens changing. So a lot of those kind of scenarios around the league with the window being open now for franchise tags. And there's other teams, and we've seen this the last couple of years, Paul, more than ever, where a team might just throw a tag on somebody as a 1-year tight end or 1 year as a kicker, just to have him for one more year. There's no intent to negotiate. So you're not looking to make a long-term deal with one. I think the Dolphins did that with Mike Gesicki last year. They put a tag on him at a reasonable number as a tight end. They never had any discussion for an extension. So there's a lot of different philosophies at work here. When the tag was first put out there, not to acquiesce too far back in our history, but I was involved with the making of this tag. It was to protect the teams from losing their best player when free agency hit. That's what it was for. It's evolved now into a whole bunch of other things. I have never used a tag in all my years, Paul. Never used the franchise tag. Didn't have to, always made deals. It was always the threat of the tag that got the two sides together to negotiate. Seems like that has been pushed a little further down the road now, and they actually use tags, and it becomes a little more animosity. And it's always an interesting time. whether teams philosophize, their philosophy is to use the tag or not. Here we're at that point again.
Well, I will say, Randy, right off the top, that again, if I'm ever set to be a free agent from Heavy, feel free to use the franchise tag on me. No threat necessary. I will sign on the dotted line to be retained. So I just wanted to make sure that is perfectly clear right from the get-go. That is firmly
Probably
on the
smart
table.
business on your end, Paul. Smart business.
That's 100% true, and I don't know. To be honest, I'm not sure if the people at Heavy would actually consider using the franchise tag. That is a high honor, but that's neither here nor there. Let's get into it here with another one of your observations, and it's fascinating because as we watch a situation with Kyler Murray in Arizona and trying to determine what's going to happen here, because the Cardinals have made an interesting leap of faith with the construct of this coaching staff and the relationship between when Kyler Murray and this new coaching staff could have a dramatic effect on his future, especially since he's dealing with an injury that could compromise him for at least some big portion of the upcoming season. A lot to unpack here, Randy.
Yeah, and at a lot of different levels. You're right. I think it was clear that Jonathan Gannon made part of his interview process clear that he thinks Kyler Murray is an elite talent. He thinks he's one of the best in the league. My guess is that's not common around the league, but that's what he did to get the job. So that was part of his interview. I'm sure of it. And now they, like you said, have hired a 35-year-old, relatively inexperienced offensive coordinator who was a tight end coach of the Browns and has been around a little bit. But it'll be interesting to see what kind of an offense they come up with in Kyler's on Kyler's behalf, because you're right, he's probably going to miss a big chunk of next season. So they're going to have to go find a quarterback in the interim. And maybe that's the idea they have in the back of their mind, Paul, is we're going to go find a quarterback. And then when Kyler comes, he comes, but we can't make an offense around this 5'9" quarterback. We've got to have a longer term plan. And my guess is it won't be what Kyler has run in the past. So even though they're saying the right things about Kyler, I don't know at the end of the day if this is the right setup for him. But at least they're taking the high road by saying he's an elite talent. The other thing is, it will be determined if he fits with this new scheme or not.
100%. And this is one that another item here is that we've talked about the potential of Eric Bieniemy leaving the Kansas City Chiefs and going to a new location. I'm going to be honest, we're just talking about the threat of the franchise tag. If someone threatened me and said, hey, you have to go coach for Washington, I'd be like, okay, I'm back. I didn't know we were going to go that far. But apparently he willingly picked to go to the Washington Commanders, who again have checks notes Sam Howell as QB1. What the heck is going on here, Randy?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I have no problem with Eric Bieniemy and his skill set and how good he is. I think the commitment that they're doing it publicly for whatever reason to Sam Howell is the one that would make me more nervous than anything else. I think we all agreed that Eric had to move on from Kansas City. Whether he really wanted to or not is another question. I can't imagine that it's going to be the same unless he's going to bring Pat Mahomes with him. So he's going to do things on his own. I wish he could have found a more stable situation than where the Washington football team is right now, with new ownership likely to come in, with Ron Rivera maybe on the edge of being long-term answer there. So there's going to be questions about that whole setup. But most of all, what are they going to do at quarterback? And they seem to have doubled down on Sam Howell again. So I don't really understand that one. I think Eric has been put in a tough spot because of the failure to really gain any traction with one of these head coaching jobs the last 4 or 5 years. Now he's got to do it in a lesser spot. But I'll say this, if he's modestly successful, it will equate to a head job somewhere, because I think people around the league know that the Commanders aren't the Kansas City Chiefs, and they do have some talent, but this will be an Eric Bieniemy run show on offense, and will remove all doubt. Either he's really good, or he's still got some growing. It'll all come out in the wash now. So there's no more hiding behind Andy Reid in any way, shape, or form.
You know, Randy, I never really thought about it, but maybe Washington is the perfect win-win, because if you stink with Washington, of course you're stuck. It was Washington. And if you have the Midas touch, oh my gosh, let's put this guy in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Look what he just did with Sam Howell, for Pete's sake. I hadn't thought of it, Randy, but you know what? Hit the nail on the head, quite frankly.
It's a tough spot for him, but there is a lot of risk reward. I think the risk is minimal, but the reward is high. And I think that will be seen by people around the league. In most cases, you're right. He might have a built-in excuse if the thing blows up after a year.
Well, Randy, I have to say, first off, good luck tonight to the Seattle Sea Dragons, for Pete's sake, in the XFL. I have no idea who you apparently angered in the XFL scheduling office for this to be happening here, but maybe they're just testing your mental fortitude to see what really the Seattle Sea Dragons team is made of. But nonetheless, an absolutely spectacular show. Every show with you is great each week, but getting this level of insight on a lot of the things that fans don't know is really the secret sauce to make all of this work. So, Randy, we really appreciate your insight as always, pal.
Thanks, Paul. Look forward to chatting next week.